Hello kitty, Shrunkle Spurt here, and today we're reviewing Samsung's Galaxy S25 Plus, the piggy in the middle of the fresh new S25 series. But is it a prime bit of pork loin, or is it more of a manky old expired sausage roll? Or an old bit of pork scratching you just found down the back of the sofa? Sorry, I'll stop with the weird pig analogy now. But hey, the Galaxy S25 Plus isn't just bigger than the regular vanilla S25, it also boasts a few upgrades, including a crisper screen, more storage, and a bigger battery what charges faster. All of that, and thankfully the Plus model isn't quite as bowel-quiveringly expensive as the Galaxy S25 Ultra. Although it will still drain your savings by roughly $1,000 unless you take advantage of Samsung's trade-in deals. Now, I've had my Sims stuffed in it for a good few days now, so here's my Galaxy S25 Plus review, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now first up, I gotta say, personally I do prefer the more compact nature of the regular Galaxy S25 versus the Plus, but the Plus doesn't feel outrageously huge. It's standard smartphone size in 2025. You do have exceedingly skinny bezels surrounding that display, so no excess bulk. And the Plus model's reasonably slender as well, just a Moth's Mansack over 7mm. And barely any extra girth added by the camera bumps as well, which only just slightly out of that back end. Although this doesn't prevent the inevitable jiggle action. And of course it's the same old standard Samsung Galaxy smartphone design here, so stick the S25 Plus side by side with last year's S24 Plus, and it's kind of like comparing a cup of pret-a-manger coffee with a mug of hot mud. And let's face it, this design is so familiar now, it's not likely to set many hearts aflutter, despite the rather delightful navy finish here. You can also grab this phone in icy blue, mint or silver shadow. Really like that mint model too. And Samsung also has some online exclusive colours, including some pretty bright, bold, in-your-face efforts. And pretty much the only design change that Samsung bothered with for the S25 Plus was thickening up those camera lenses. So you now got bigger bezels surrounding them, which I don't really like, to be honest. And be warned, the Galaxy S25 Plus is quite a smooth, slippery morpho, so not much grip there, and of course no handy camera bump like most other mobiles to conveniently rest your finger on, just to help keep it stable if you are using the thing one-handed. That wee grumble aside, I haven't dropped the S25 Plus once this week, and of course your uncle likes a drink, can be a little bit butterfingery at times. You got yourself a bit of Victus 2 Gorilla Glass front and back on the S25 Plus, so hopefully it won't splinter and crack if you do happen to fumble this thing. Although I would have really liked to see a pre-installed screen protector on the S25 Plus, because my review model's already got some pretty noticeable scratches after just a week of full-on use. So you'll absolutely want to slap your own on here, especially as there's a grand's worth of tech. You don't want it coated in scratches in just a month or two. You've got the usual Armour aluminium frame and a lovely matte finish for that back end as well. So again, resists grimy, greasy, nasty, fingerprinty horribleness. And full-on IP68 water and dust resistant as usual. No surprises on the software front, it's, as always, Samsung's very own OneUI 7 slopped on top of Android 15. Slopped, quite an appropriate word, because it is a little bit messy, shall we say. But with the rather generous promise of 7 years of OS updates and security patching, it should see you through the long haul. AI is of course the spine of OneUI 7, with the option of disabling any cloud-based processing so all your data isn't spanked online without your permission. I gotta say, the big shiny new AI features are a bit of a mixed bag to say the least. So for instance, you got Now Briefing, which is mostly pants, offering up little more than a glimpse of whether you're gonna get absolutely shitted on if you step outdoors, your upcoming calendar shenanigans, and a seemingly completely random Spotify playlist that's just packed full of random music unlike anything else you've ever listened to. And as much as I love Jimmy Eat World, I haven't listened to them since the last time I actually had more hair on my head than stashed in my Y-fronts. I mean, the closest it's come to actually recommending me some metal music, which is what I usually listen to, is the other day when it suggested I slap on a bit of Nickelback, at which point I almost took a bloody tin opener to this thing. I mean, seriously, in some areas that's still a hanging offence. One of the most useful bits of the briefings is when sports scores automatically pop up on the lock screen and stuffed away in the status bar for your chosen team. although any fellow Macams might want to disable that particular feature. In fact, midway through that particular match, Sunderland versus Hull, mercifully the now brief and stuff all vanished. It stopped displaying the scores. I couldn't tell if that was my S25 Plus just being kind to me and did not end particularly well, or whether that's just a bug. Sometimes it's hard to tell with OneUI if something is a feature or just a bug. You know, some of the AI stuff's pretty decent, so the smarter notification layout and everything, very, very good. That all works wonderfully. Translation and transcription now support more languages, although as usual can be a bit sketchy. Like, for some reason, my S25 Plus seems to think that I'm Australian, and it flat out refused to transcribe one of my voice recordings until I downloaded the English Australian language pack. I swear to God, I wasn't even that hammered. And then it went and f***ed up most of what I said anyway, possibly because I'm not from the land of punchy marsupials and toilet spiders. And as always, some of the best features like the web summarization tool are confined to Samsung's own apps and services. You can't use them in the likes of Google Chrome. But I do approve of some of the other One UI 7 updates, like for instance the ability to separate out the control center with the notifications panel. And don't worry if you're not a fan, because you can revert it back to the original setup by tapping into panel settings. Just one of many tips and tricks you'll find in my Galaxy S25 series tips and tricks guide. Go check that out. And I also love the upgraded Game Boost toolbar, which has finally been renovated so it's easy to access and a bit smarter than before, even if some of the tools like the frame rate boost don't really seem to do much in any of the games I've tested them with. And some of those stalwart Samsung classics are still present and correct, even if they haven't really been given much of a spit shine recently, like good old Dex. But yeah, there's still far too much duplication going on in One UI 7. All of Samsung's own bits like Samsung Pay, Internet, Smart Things, etc. Just no! I just want to get rid of all of it and just stick with the Google stuff. Now, as for the Galaxy S25 Plus's dynamic AMOLED 2X display, well, this is pretty much the same tech as the previous generation. It's a 6.7 incher here on the Plus. You can sandwich neatly between the super compact Galaxy S25 and the mega enormous Ultra model. It's more of a standard size these days. It's a Quad HD Plus panel once again, just like the old S24 Plus. You just need to remember to actually activate the maximum resolution within the display settings because it's not set to that by default. Of course, Samsung Playback veers towards the more vivid, poppy, in-your-face type color reproduction. You can absolutely tinker with the vividness in the display settings. You've got nice sharp contrast, full HDR10 streaming support in the likes of Netflix, and the refresh rate maxes out at 120Hz. So One UI 7 and supported apps certainly feel pretty smooth. If you boost the brightness all the way up, it is practically eye searing, which is just as well because you've got no anti-reflective Armor 2 glass slapped on here, unlike the S25 Ultra. Outdoor visibility's been absolutely fine for me, but then the S25 Plus hasn't had to battle anything much more than a load of gloom. Although I haven't said that, holy the sun is actually, I think, starting to break through the clouds a bit there. This is the first time I've actually felt daylight in about 3 weeks. I'm slightly concerned that I'm just going to spontaneously combust. Let me just go check this screen. Yeah, no worries there. Even with a proper bit of sun glare, absolutely fine the visibility. However, bear in mind if you are quite sensitive to OLED flicker when you're, doom scrolling at 3 AM like the rest of us, well, you might want to steer clear because Samsung doesn't do much when it comes to PWM dimming or DC dimming. There are plenty of eye comfort features on there, so at least you won't be full-on migraine-y within minutes. And of course, it's a stereo speaker setup here on the Galaxy S25 Plus, and a highly respectable arrangement too. Nice and loud when you bump the volume up, but the clarity doesn't take a hit. Vocals come through nice and crisp and reasonably bassy. Not the bassiest of any blowers that I've tested recently, but pretty good. But what powers the Plus? Well, same as the rest of the S25 series, you've got Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy stuffed in there. A slightly overclocked version of Qualcomm's popular Super Hench chipset with the same 12 gigs of RAM actions stuffed in here as before. And this here is the most obvious upgrade versus the old S24 Plus, especially if you happen to be a gamer. While the likes of Genshin Impact and Wuthering Waves occasionally stumbled on the old Exynos-powered blower, you'll enjoy beautifully smooth performance here on the Galaxy S25 Plus. And even if you're proper hooked on your anime girls in skimpy clothing running around smacking things really hard game of choice, This skinny brick stays quite cool even after hours of gaming with assistance from the ever so slightly bigger vapor chamber. And no worries if you do want to install some whopping great buggers like Wuthering Waves and Genshin Impact, because the Galaxy S25 Plus starts at 256 gigs of storage, mercifully, unlike the regular S25. You can upgrade that to a full half a terabyte if you slip even more cash into Samsung's slinky gusset. Oh, and also, unlike the regular Galaxy S25, the Plus model serves up a tasty bit of ultra-wideband tech, just like the Ultra. Yum. And the battery is almost as big here as in the Ultra, the 4,900 mAh capacity, but it's still significantly smaller than a lot of recent rivals emerging from China thanks to their silicon carbon tech. So I was slightly worried that the Plus would start falling behind as far as battery life was concerned, but I needn't have been worried at all because the battery life's been pretty bloody solid on this thing. A regular day for me with my SIM slapped inside of here generally involves around 6-ish hours of screen on time, including general mixed use, lots of web browsing, messaging, of course plenty of camera play to test out the optics, video streaming and video chatting, and plenty of audio streaming when the phone screen was hibernating as well on the likes of Spotify and Audible. And even with all of that, I typically ended with around 35 to 40% battery life through a very long, exhausting day. It's only if I did a proper bit of gaming or something on this thing that I would actually manage to get it into power saving mode by the time I was all tucked up with Teddy. And yeah, thankfully it does charge up faster than the regular Galaxy S25. You got 45 watt fast charging here. Still pretty measly compared with, again, a lot of the Chinese rivals though, which are topping the sort of 100 watt mark. And apparently there's been some reports from some areas of the Galaxy S25 Plus not playing well with certain brands of USB cable, although thankfully I've had absolutely zero jip from the one that Samsung chucked in the box with it. I've also had no problems charging wirelessly. You got Qi 2 15 watt wireless charging support on this bad boy. I've just been using my old Pixel charger, that's worked absolutely fine. So let's conclude this absolutely smouldering Galaxy S25 Plus review with a squint at the camera tech. And I won't spend too long banging on about the optics because it's the exact same camera setup as before, the exact same setup as the S25, which I already did an in-depth review of. So of course you've got your 50 megapixel wide shooter, you've got your 12 megapixel ultra wide shooter, and then a single 10 megapixel telephoto lens with 3 times optical zoom. I do like one little tweak that Samsung has made, shifting the settings bar down to the bottom here so you can quickly and easily toggle the resolution. You can stick it in high-res 50 meg mode, change the aspect ratio, switch on motion photos, and access all of the various camera settings. In here you'll spot a bit of intelligent optimization. I left this on the default settings, so maximum level, but kept the scene optimizer knocked off. And I wasn't too shocked to see the exact same results spaffed out by the S25 Plus compared with the smaller S25. Even without Samsung's scene optimizer, the S25 still occasionally does that iPhone-y thing of overexposing some shots, blanching the tones to brighten them up a bit. Personally, I do prefer a bit more texture, some deeper shadows. And speaking of which, the S25 Plus suffers the exact same issue as the rest of the S25 lineup, where darker areas sometimes appear rather disturbingly noisy, especially those night skies. And portrait shots can also be a bit of a mixed bag, with some intense separation and smoothing on show at times. Out of strong natural light, faces can lack detail or look a little bit soft, and those tones aren't always quite right. But thankfully, daylight portrait shots seem to fare a lot better. A lot more crispy detail, tones looked a lot more natural, and occasionally worked pretty well. And of course, you've got the ultra-wide angle shooter, which doesn't balk the tones too badly, and that telephoto snapper works pretty well for getting you closer to your subject, up to around the 10 times zoom level, and then of course it is diminishing returns after that. Got all the usual bonus bits chucked on here as well, including the Expert, Raw and the Pro modes. Samsung staples like the food mode and that all single take, which is pretty good for your family pics. And of course you've got the usual AI photo editing shindiggery slapped on here as well. So for instance, the Galaxy S25 Plus can quickly and easily remove any object or person that's lingering in your shot that you do not fancy leaving in there. And this usually works pretty damn well. Absolutely stunning stuff. The likes of best shot works pretty well if you've got a kid that is prone to gurning at the camera quite often. And the Galaxy S25 Plus does a pretty bang-up job for your video shenanigans as well, capturing up to 8K resolution footage as usual, or 4K footage at 60 frames per second with HDR10 switched on. Audio capture is pretty crisp and clear from all directions as long as things aren't too gusty. The stabilization is excellent. It's only in low light where the Galaxy S25 Plus really struggles, churning out, again, grainy, noisy, horrible looking footage. If you want to, you can shoot a bit of log footage as well here on the Galaxy S25 Plus, then tweaking in post-edit. And you've also got an audio eraser tool, kind of similar to what you get on the Pixels, but just not quite as good. And using the 12 meg selfie cam here on the Galaxy S25 Plus, you can once again shoot Ultra HD resolution footage at 60 frames per second with HDR Smart enabled. The visuals pretty good. Oh, that's a bit of that sun again. Lovely stuff. Stabilization, decent. The audio pickup, respectable as well. But again, in low light, it kind of sucks. And there you have it, my lovelies. That in a tasty wee nutshell is Samsung's fresh new Galaxy S25 Plus. And of course, if you got last year's S24 Plus, upgrading to this thing would be pretty much bloody pointless, despite the fact the performance has had a severe kick up the crotch. A bit of that Snapdragon action rather than that Exynos guff. But let's face it, these phones nowadays, they're just iterations of one another. There's no need to upgrade year on year, especially with the ridiculously great software support that Samsung serves up. Of course, as always, really stiff competition for the Galaxy S25 Plus from the likes of the OnePlus 13, which I absolutely ruddy adore. It's more affordable. I prefer the Oxygen OS experience and the camera tech in general. You've also, of course, got the Pixel 9 Pro and Pixel 9 Pro XL if you want another big one. The likes of the Xiaomi 14T series as well, soon to be superseded by the 15. Stay tuned for a bit more of that in the next few days. Wink, wink. And also, of course, the excellent Oppo Find X8 Pro. But what do you reckon of the Galaxy S25 Plus? Have you actually got it stuffed in your pants right now? It'd be great to hear your thoughts, your early experiences so far. Please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech, and have yourselves a ruddy wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you.